Okay, so welcome to Eat, Move, Think, the show about optimal wellness brought to you by Medcan.
Wow. Do it again.
Oh, I was practicing.
Okay, ready?
Welcome to Eat, Move, Think,
the show about
optimal
wellness brought to you by
Medcan.
Yeah, this is extremely good. Thank you.
Hey, Chris, how's it going?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. Yeah, how are you?
I'm also good. Yes, but what if, let's say I wasn't? What if I was having an awful day and we're doing our podcast intro and you ask me how I am, and then I actually am honest with you about, I'm having a really hard time today or this week. What do you then do?
Whoa, this just got real.
It got real fast. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I would say, well, tell me about that, I think, is what I would say.
Yeah, but just thinking about that is a tough thing to deal with. Like, how can you best help someone who comes to you with a struggle when you don't know what to say or do, and they are really looking for some help? And maybe that if that person is a coworker, that adds a whole other level to it. Like, we work together. There's what do you say? What don't you say?
I think this is really important, actually, because these types of conversations happen all the time. Elevator,
every day,
parking garage,
multiple times a day.
On the street, you see somebody, you're walking your dog or whatever, and it's that exchange. Hey, how you doing?
The first thing you say to anyone you see.
I'm good, usually is what you get.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you don't? What if somebody says, yeah, I'm struggling? What do you do next? I'm Chris.
I'm Jazz. We're the producers of Eat, Move, Think.
And in this episode, Medcan's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Peter Nord, is in conversation with
Medcan's social worker and MindStation team lead, Jennifer Baldachin.
So Jennifer Baldachin has really thought through what to do, how to have tough conversations, how to talk about mental health with someone who may be struggling.
Yeah, how to give the response that they might need while also still paying attention to what you need at the same time.
It's an important time for this conversation about conversations. January, I think everybody is talking about mental health. It's a tough month all around, thanks to the cold and the dark.
If you have been struggling to engage with people who you love and want to care for, this episode is a guide for you when you are helping somebody else deal with an issue or a struggle. But if you need mental health support, there are lots of resources out there that can help you too. If you're dealing with an emergency, you should call 911. You can also reach out to Crisis Services Canada. They have a 24/7 toll-free number. It's 1-833-456-4566.
Or call the Canadian Crisis Hotline at 1-888-353-2273. To book a consultation with someone from Medcan's Mental Wellbeing team, contact Mental Wellbeing at medcan.com.
All right, without further ado, here is Dr. Peter Nord.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Eat, Move, Think. I'm excited to welcome Jennifer Baldachin today. She's a social worker therapist and also the team lead of Medcan's MindStation. So Jennifer, welcome. How's your day going?
Good, thanks. Thank you so much for having me here. It's busy at Medcan, and I think this is a really important conversation to have today, so I appreciate being here.
Yeah, I think it's so great that we're kicking off our whole season for Eat, Move, Think with a spotlight on mental health. Certainly the first few months of the year can be really hard. We've got holiday visa bills that need to be paid. It's like cold, it's dark. And, at this time of year, we ourselves may be more likely to feel a bit down and also recognize that friends or coworkers may also be struggling a bit. So I think we're getting better at talking about mental health, but there's still a long way to go. It can be especially challenging to know what to say to friends or family or colleagues or what not to say and when to say it. So we all want to be as supportive as we can, but it's not always easy. Why do you think it can be so tough to talk about our struggles?
Well, I think part of it has to do with the way you were brought up, knowing what your past history was. When you spoke to somebody in the past about something that was difficult, how was it related back to you? Was it that, in our family, we just don't talk about that? Or maybe you were shut down by saying, well, it's all in your head. Or when I was your age, I didn't feel that way. You should be grateful. Look at everything you have around you. So sometimes when we've tried to be vulnerable and we've opened up ourselves to ask for help, we were shut down. So then you learn as you get older that it's not safe to open up. It could also be that society's taught you various stereotypes that if you do open up with your difficult mental health, that means you're sick, that you're weak, that you should have shame around that, or maybe that you're a attention seeker. So with all that negativity surrounding you, it's harder to just be real.
So let's create an imaginary scenario that we'll be following for the rest of this episode. Say I'm in the office. One day it's January. I sit down for lunch with a coworker and they let me know that they've really been struggling. And so they're being vulnerable with me and they trust me enough that they're confiding in me. I want to be as supportive as I can. What should I do?
The first thing you should do is create a space of safety, which means close your door. You want to show that it's just the two of you in the room. And what that also means is to put your phone away, not just turn it over and leave it on your desk, because what that's saying is that I'm here for you. I want to listen to what you have to say, unless my phone rings.
Yeah.
And if you see it flash or buzz, you're going to be curious to take a peek. So the first thing you should do is put your phone away, turn off your watch so that you can fully be engaged in that conversation. It's also really important to discuss confidentiality. Be very clear what your limits are in your role. Say, is this off the record? Is this something that if I feel the need to bring outsiders in, I may have to do that? And you may be as clear as saying, if this has to do with child abuse, a threat to yourself, a threat to others, then I'm going to have to open that door and open up the conversation. So you want to be honest and open with that, with those limits. So you both know what you're getting into. It's very important to know your role. You're not a therapist. And even if you are a therapist by profession, you're not this person's therapist. And that's very important to have that distinction as well. As I mentioned earlier, you really want to consider the time and the place. So if you happen to be in an elevator, you're not going to have a conversation. If you're in the hallway, you don't want to have a conversation, even if nobody's in the hallway or in the elevator with you at that moment, because as soon as somebody walks by, they may hear a snippet and may take it out of context. But you're not creating a room of safety. The other thing you want to do is you want to offer them 3 areas that you can help them with. So before they really even start talking, they may sit down and say, Peter, I've got to talk to you about something. And you can say, all right, I'm here for you, but do you want me just to listen to what you have to say? Not say anything. Do you just want me to be a sounding board? Do you want my advice? Or is there something I can do for you? And that also helps you understand what they need. You're not assuming you know what they need, but you're asking them, how can I support you? Is it something, do you just want to listen? Do you want me to listen? Do you want my advice? Or do you want me to do something?
Really practical takeaways for everybody. I mean, sometimes we'll just forget those sort of things, and they're so important. Especially as you said, that safe space is going to be the first thing. So I guess if they're starting with a conversation, you just want to move that conversation to an area where it's confidential and it's a safe space for them.
Absolutely.
Right. Maybe we can talk a little bit about empathy versus sympathy as well. How do you distinguish those two things in this kind of a situation?
Empathy is the ability to understand. And there's no way you're going to understand their situation without asking. So it's about being curious, about asking questions, about taking all your assumptions and parking them at the door. And thinking that you know what the person's going through because you went through it does not mean you know what they're going through. So you have to be a bit of an investigative reporter, and you have to be curious the way you ask those questions. Empathy builds togetherness. It's the ability to understand. Sympathy is the opposite. It drives disconnection. You're glad it's not you. You feel sorry for the person. You pity the person. So one lifts the person up and the other one brings them down. So the difference in an example, empathy would be, that must be hard. That must have been really scary for you. That's empathy. That's saying, talk to me more about that. Sympathy is, I'm so sorry. Poor you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's say that they've let me know that they need me to listen. So we've asked those couple of questions. They want me just to listen. How do I show them that I'm really listening and interested in what they're sharing?
Again, I can't suggest strong enough. You put the phone away. And I keep saying it because I see that in our own practice. Everyone has their phones beside them. And I think, really? Is it like, who are you waiting for the phone call for? If it truly is an emergency, I totally get it. Then absolutely. But if it's because you want to know what's going on in the stock market, then I feel like I'm not as important.
It's almost like anything that comes on that phone is more important than what we're talking about.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if you want to show that the person is important to you, then you have to make them important to you. So put the phone away. Eye contact, leaning forward. So use your body language to show you're engaged in the conversation. You want to uncross your body. So don't have your legs crossed, don't have your arms crossed. When you have your arms crossed, your legs crossed, then you're putting a barrier between yourself and the other person. So you want to be, your body needs to be open, your eye contact is to be there together. As I mentioned earlier, you want to ask questions to show that you really want to understand. You want to get it right. And you can mirror and reframe what they say to you. You can respond, you can take what they say, reframe it in a certain way, and then say, do I have that right? Or is this what you're trying to explain? And they'll either say, yeah, that's exactly it. Or no, not quite. It's this way. So they're guiding you and they're explaining to you what's going on with them. You also don't want to turn it back onto you because it's not about you. You don't want to say, oh, I remember when it happened to me, I did blah, 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 blah. Because now you've changed the conversation. Now it's about you.
Yeah.
It's not about you. It's about them. You can bring up your experience as well, but only in a way that you're trying to understand what they're going through. So you can say, oh, something similar happened to me. Is that what you felt? So you're always bringing it back to that person. And
or
that
it made
way,
me feel that way.
Exactly.
This is how I felt when that was happening to me. Yeah.
And then they can guide you either yes or no.
And then, those are great tips for any situation for listening. We can all learn from that. How do we go to the next option? So now they've let me know that they would like my advice. This can be sort of dangerous territory, and I want to be helpful, but I may not be an expert, and I don't really want to overstep. So are there any tips that you have for giving advice?
One thing just right at the very top is you can't make decisions for them. And if they ask you, what would you do? It doesn't matter what you would do. Because if you give them advice and it's successful, they don't get to own that success because you're the one who came up with it. And if it goes south, then you're the one to blame.
Right.
So you definitely want to stay away from making a decision. The way you can offer advice is you can help brainstorm all the possibilities. And some of that brainstorming could be from your personal experience. It could also be from your expertise of what you've heard and what you've seen in the past, things that they may not have thought about. You can also help them come up with their wish list from something absolutely, from their imagination to what actually is reality. And then help them come up with the pros and cons, narrow down the list of the 3 top things that they could visualize actually making work. And then you can offer them, from your expertise, resources, phone numbers, that idea to help them get to where they want to go. I heard a quote a while ago during the pandemic. I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but it said, we're all weathering the same storm, but in different boats. And I think that even though somebody could be struggling in a situation that you've also struggled with, it doesn't mean that what worked for you is going to work for them.
Right. So let's say they've asked for some help. I'm going to try and help them. Can you suggest the best way to offer the help without extending myself too far? What if they ask for something that I can't provide?
I think it's really important to know your limits and to be authentic and to be real. What can you do? What are you willing to do, both personally and professionally? So the things you can do, you can listen, you can offer resources, you can support them with your time if you're able to, which might mean accompanying them down to HR or sitting quietly with them, or just being in the same room with them if they have to make a difficult phone call, helping them draft an email. Maybe you're willing to read it before they send it.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at what they need, asking them what they need, and then getting a sense of what can you do that would be appropriate. And if they're asking you for something that you can't do, then maybe you can suggest someone who may be able to help them.
Mm-hmm. And the whole idea of what I can and can't control seems important to remember too. There's certain things that, we have influence over and certain things that we don't. And obviously knowing what we can and can't control is going to be really important. Some of us may avoid these kind of conversations just because of that, because we can't really control what happens. So let's take this scenario a few steps back. Let's say the coworker approaches me. I've had a terrible weekend, or my day is jam-packed and I only have 20 minutes to have lunch in between meetings. How can I let them know that I don't have time for the conversation at that particular time without seeming too insensitive?
You won't seem insensitive if you're authentic. If you show that you really care for the person, you value the person, but the reality is your cup is full at the moment, then if you're able to explain that to the person, they're not going to feel like the door's shut on them. And that's what you want to do. You want to keep the door open for communication. So being honest and authentic, telling them that you care, that you want to give them the time and that you value them, then you can ask them, what time would work for you right now? Is this an immediate issue that needs to be done right now? Mm-hmm. And if it is a crisis situation, then you may wish to let the next meeting know that you may be a bit late if it's a crisis and it seems like that's what you need to do. But just by asking the person, can we meet again at 4:00? Or can this wait till tomorrow because I have half an hour that I can give to you? That may be fine too.
Mm-hmm.
So don't jump just because the person says, I need to speak to you. It may not be a crisis, but you also have the ability to ask and find out.
Yeah. Saying like, this seems really important to both of us. And, I just haven't got the time right now, but I definitely want to make the time. Yeah. Let's say we've gone through those options and we've had the conversation. Say I've taken all the advice, my coworker feels supported and heard, and now we go back to the rest of our day. What sort of feelings might I experience? What's the best way for me to move on from that conversation? Because it might be a little upsetting. Is it normal for me to feel worried or down or maybe just a bit off for the rest of the day?
Absolutely. And I think that in the news just recently, they've been talking about that with Damar Hamlin, who was the football player mm-hmm. who had the cardiac arrest on the field. People were watching football for the fun of watching football, and they didn't expect to see a trauma. Mm-hmm. And they may have been triggered because a family member had had a heart attack.
Right.
So it's a very common issue. It's called vicarious trauma, which is what you're describing, and it's in the news right now. So vicarious trauma means that you're traumatized from what you've seen, what you've heard. We see that with ambulance drivers, firefighters, people who are in EMS, mm-hmm. when they see this over and over again. And so it absolutely is normal. And you could feel sad. You could feel angry. You are feeling the feelings of what you've just heard, and you have to process it somehow to have some closure. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to just shut the door and get on with your day when somebody you care about, is hurting. Mm-hmm. So some of the symptoms of that, you could be preoccupied by thinking about it afterwards. If it's something you actually saw, you could have flashbacks like PTSD. You could mm-hmm. have flashbacks of it in your mind's eye. You may lose your appetite. You may have trouble sleeping. You feel for the person. So it's important to recognize that this is affecting you, but also recognize that it's not you. You're not the one who's going through the trauma. It's not you that's going through the suffering. And it's very important to separate yourself from the other person. You're there as a friend to offer support, and you did that. You did your job. And then that's a way of putting some closure to it. You also need to breathe because your mind and your body are connected. So if your mind is thinking about trauma, then your body reacts as if the trauma is happening to you. And it's not. You're safe, you're fine, you're in your office. So by breathing, it literally takes 3 minutes of breathing to turn off that fight or flight response that you're getting because of a thought. So it might mean you need to go outside and do a quick walk around the block, get some fresh air, focus on your breathing, slow down your heart rate, lower your blood pressure, and that will help ground you to the here and now. And if you feel you need to talk to someone yourself to process what you've just heard, then take that opportunity to ask for help for yourself.
Yeah, because we're connected to other people around us. We're going to definitely feel, and that's normal. What you're saying about the breathing is, leads to that idea of mindfulness as well. So that's really good advice. Such a simple thing that anybody can do is just control your breathing, sort of settle things down a little bit and reframe for yourself. That's great. So I guess in the end, if you find yourself in this situation, it's a good thing. The person has come to you because they trust you. So whether we're at work, with friends, or with family, maybe you can summarize a few tips for ways to create an environment of open and supportive communication around mental health, just in general.
I think one of the most important things is to normalize it. 5 out of 5 people have mental health. We all have mental health. And we're all doing the best we can in the environment that we have and with the coping strategies that we have. So to recognize that, to be authentic, to be open, to be honest, to be real, to even talk about our own struggles, to be vulnerable, allows other people to trust you, and then they can be more vulnerable with you as well.
So what would you say is the most important thing we should keep in mind as we engage in conversations like this? I mean, you've mentioned authenticity a couple of times. What are the kind of things that come to mind when we think just a couple of big takeaways for everybody?
That we're all human. Sometimes our coping strategies are not healthy. Some of our coping strategies are healthy.
Maybe you can tell us some healthy coping strategies and some maybe unhealthy coping strategies that some people may be demonstrating at any time.
Healthy coping strategies would be things that are good for you, such as exercise. Exercise is great because it forces you to breathe, which turns off that fight or flight response you get when you're stressed. It's also a healthy distraction so that you're not thinking about the weight of the world when you're exercising. You're just focusing on the exercise. Eating healthy, being with friends and family, journaling, meditating, playing games on your phone like Solitaire, Candy Crush, reading, watching movies. Those are all healthy distractions to help you through difficult times. Unhealthy coping strategies would be something that makes you numb out and put that worry or put that stress on the back burner because you can't deal with it right now. Alcohol, drugs are the first ones that come to mind. But the reason why it's unhealthy is because at some point you have to deal with the stressor. And what you're doing is you're just numbing the edges. You're just putting it on pause. And that's why it's a coping strategy, because you may not be able to cope with your life as it is right now with the stressors. So you're just numbing out so that you don't have to think about it right now. But it's unhealthy because obviously it's not going to be healthy for you, for your body or for your mind. But it's the way we're trying to get through a difficult time. So you have to take away judgment, take away blame, and look at the strength that the person is giving you in front of you. And if someone is asking for help, to be there in whatever capacity you can, even if it is to just say, I don't know what to do, but I'll listen.
Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for your advice about how we can support one another as we navigate the rest of the winter months and deal with the mental health challenges that may come along. I have to say, this has been an easy conversation about difficult conversations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nord, for having me here today.
And thanks to our listeners. If you have any questions about your own mental health challenges or those of a friend, colleague, or family member, please reach out. We're looking forward to a great 2023, hoping you have a year of amazing health and well-being.
That was our wellness host, Dr. Peter Nord, in conversation with Medcan social worker and MindStation team lead, Jennifer Baldachin.
This episode has been a guide for you to help someone else deal with an issue or struggle, but if you need mental health support, there are lots of resources out there that can help you. To book a consultation with someone from Medcan's mental well-being team, contact mentalwellbeing@medcan.com. If you're dealing with an emergency, you should call 911. You can also reach out to Crisis Services Canada's toll-free number that's available 24/7, 1-833-456-4566.
Or call the Canadian Crisis Hotline at 1-888-353-2273.
There are episode insights and lots of links for more resources that you can visit on our website. Check it out at eatmovethinkpodcast.com, and definitely give Medcan a follow on Twitter and Instagram at MedcanLiveWell.
And you can always reach us at info@eatmovethinkpodcast.com to say hello or just send us a tip or a suggestion.
Yeah, we're always looking for new ideas, so if you have one, definitely shoot it our way.
Eat Move Think is produced by Ghost Bureau. Jasmine Ratch is managing producer. Social media and strategy support is from Chantal Gertin, Andrew Imex, and Emily Bozick, and I'm executive producer Christopher Scholgen.
We will be back next week with another episode examining the latest in health and wellness.
Yeah, Medcan CEO Sean Francis is talking to the creator of the Bell Let's Talk campaign,
Whoa.
Mary Deacon, about what's next for mental health in Canada.
Amazing. Catch you next week.
This podcast is intended to provide general information about health and wellness only and is not designed or intended to constitute or be used as a substitute for medical advice, treatment, or diagnosis. You should always talk to your Medcan healthcare provider for individual medical advice, diagnosis, and treatment, including your specific health and wellness needs. This podcast is based on the information available at the time of preparation and is only accurate and current as of that date. Source information and recommendations are subject to change based on scientific evidence as it evolves over time. Medcan is not responsible for future changes or updates to the information and recommendations and assumes no obligation to update based on future developments. Reference to or mention of specific treatments or therapies does not constitute or imply a recommendation or endorsement. The links provided within the associated document are to assist the reader with the specific information highlighted. Any third-party links are not endorsed by Medcan.